Atheists have a lot of arguments, but they never really think of anything new that the church hasn't had answers to for the past 2,000 years. So let's answer them.
Hell no! Trash ass nigga!
Hi, what's good YouTube? It's Papa Rome, back with another video. I am an atheistic heathen, and these are 10 of the worst atheist arguments that I have ever heard.
Religion causes wars. Well, actually, only 7% of all human wars were caused by religion, and if you remove Islamic wars, that number drops down to 3%.
This is actually true. Looking throughout history, very little wars have started out of pure religious purpose, but this argument is fucking stupid, and it's always been stupid. Now, I'm not anti-religion. Most atheists aren't anti-religion, but most atheists will make the claim that religions are harmful or somewhat damaging. And the thing is, we don't need a war to prove this to be true. And we don't even have to be broad about it. I mean, we can use our fucking eyeballs, read the plain text reading of books like the Quran or the Bible, and we see verses that justify all kinds of horrible shit. Things like murder, rape, slavery, taking of women, and raping them during war times. I mean, all of it. I mean, especially the Bible. It's fucking garbage.
Man, this shit is garbage.
You know, like Leviticus 25, Ephesians 6:9, Numbers 31. God frequently brings about the death of innocents, whether or not you have the firstborn children of Egypt, in which God dropped fucking napalm upon all the firstborn children because, and I mean, God is specific about this, because the Pharaoh owned a bunch of his people, a bunch of his Israelites. I mean, he's a fucking hypocrite for that alone, and he's a horrible person. I mean, you're God. You can do anything, but you choose to kill babies because someone else owns slaves, but you also permit slavery.
What the fuck is wrong with you? You the fuck is what's wrong with society?
And other times you have God straight up commanding it, saying, oh, you can own slaves for life. You can bequeath them to your children. God can say not to eat shellfish. God can say not to wear mixed fabrics. God can say all these things, but he can't say not to enslave your fellow man. No.
A lot of evil has been done in the name of religion. This is true, but the most murderous people in human history have been atheists. This doesn't mean religion is true, it just means you can't use that as an argument against it.
No! Are you sure?
So this guy already, like, off bat demonstrates that he pretty much has no fucking clue what he's talking about. Nazi Germany was encapsulated with Christian ideas, and Hitler himself was a raised Catholic. On each Nazi uniform Hitler had commissioned, on their belt buckle, it had the words Gott mit uns, meaning God with us. The whole idea of Nazi supremacy and Aryan supremacy before eugenics was thought of was the idea that the Jewish people were not God's chosen people, and it was the Aryans. I mean, look, this is even a fucking quote from Mein Kampf, Hitler's fucking personal book. He literally says he is fighting for the work of the Lord. He was a Christian, devout as a bitch, and so were the Nazis. Most of them were. Dodging Christian involvement is pathetic. Now, I will be the first to agree that it is unwise and, I mean, practically useless to get into the screaming match of, oh, well, there's this bad atheist guy, or there's this bad religious guy, back and forth. This is just a fact. These people, like Mao Zedong, were not, and there is no evidence at least, of them doing the actions that they did because of their disbelief in a God. However, the amount of people, it is insurmountable, the amount of people who do bad things in the name of their God. Another thing religious people tend to get wrong is what atheism is. Atheism is the answer to one single question. Do you believe there is a God? Are you convinced with the proposition of a God? It's a yes or no. Being an atheist doesn't tell you anything else. Me personally, I'm an atheist, but I'm also a secular humanist. I believe in a moral basis that is surrounded by logic, reason, experience, things that can be proven to be real and that can be observed or at least demonstrated to exist, and not a God who has no evidence. That being said, you can, I mean, just as easy be a secular atheist non-humanist and say fuck all humans, but also not believe in a God. This idea that as an atheist is definitionally only the answer to one question, that people can draw from that as influence to do horrible things, I think personally is just simply not true. Atheism at its core is completely neutral. Okay, you can add whatever fucking beliefs you want on top of that, whether they be negative or positive. Okay, people do bad shit in the name of Christianity, in the name of their religion, in the name of their God. People do not do bad things in the name of atheism. Okay, that's just fucking stupid.
If you were born somewhere else, you wouldn't be a Christian. Okay, and if you were born somewhere else, you wouldn't be an atheist. Everyone's beliefs are shaped by their context.
But it is different, though, in the fact that the biggest reason as to why most atheists become atheists is because of the lack of evidence. The lack of evidence for a God is persistent no matter where you are born. Okay, that stays the same. However, Christianity is a specific God with a specific set of rules that is not persistent everywhere you go. I mean, it's not even just saying you'll be Christian if you're born here. It's also if you're born in certain places, you're more likely to be a different type of Christian and interpret the book in an entirely different way. The other fact that differentiates the two is that atheism is not making a positive claim. It is not actively claiming that God doesn't exist or that God does exist. However, religions like Christianity are actively saying God does exist. The thing is, these claims cannot all be true. The Christian God cannot be real, and the Hindu gods also be real. You know, if we go off the Bible and their books, they both cannot coexist at the same time. Atheism being the default position and religion requiring indoctrination and teaching. All I would really say to this point is that if you do not teach anybody religion anywhere, then most people would probably come to the conclusion of being an atheist.
How do you know which religion is true? Well, everyone, religious or not, has faith in a certain worldview. It's just that some worldviews are called religions and some are secular. But everyone has to ask the question of which worldview best explains the world.
You know, I didn't think it possible before this to make a video dedicated to asking yourself questions that you find to then ask yourself and still fucking dodge the question. How do you know your belief in God is true? How do you know your beliefs are true? Saying, well, everybody has to have a worldview. That's not a fucking get out of jail free card there, buddy. I have worldviews, I have things I believe to be true, but I also have evidence as to why I think they are true. I'm not taking shit on faith, and I can actually articulate as to why I think something is true. This other thing of, oh, well, everybody has something that they think it best explains the world. Yeah, but some people have evidence and have reasons as to why they think their worldview is correct. You don't. That's the issue. We are asking you, how do you know your worldview of Christianity is true? True is objective. True isn't how you feel. What you feel to be true or what you feel to be correct is fucking irrelevant. We didn't fucking ask you what best explains the world to you. We asked you, how do you know what you think best explains the world is true? And this guy is just fucking pathetic. I mean, how are you gonna make a whole video about answering questions that you're giving to yourself and you still fucking run from the question? If we are going off the Christian God and you are supposed to spread word that he is real, spread word that Christ is the way, you fucking suck. You fail at that, okay? You really do. God is looking down at you with fucking shame because this fucking mouth breather just decided to come on here as if he is the steward of God, and when he literally asks himself, how do you know this is true? He cannot give an answer. He decided to get on here, quote unquote, debunk atheist arguments. Meanwhile, he literally cannot explain why anybody should think his God is true. This guy's dumb as hell. Respectfully, this guy's a fucking idiot.
There's no scientific proof that God exists. Well, by definition, science can only prove things inside the natural world, and by definition, God is something outside the natural world, so science can neither prove nor disprove God. There's no evidence of anything supernatural. Well, that's just not accurate. There are medically documented cases of people with demonic possession speaking in languages they don't know, for example, and people with near-death experiences getting information they never had access to.
Come here. Shut your stupid ass up!
See, I don't actually even think I gotta explain why what the fuck he just said is so stupid, but I will anyways. Let's take a look at this book, okay? Demonic Foes. A psychiatrist investigates diabolic possessions in the US. But before I crack it open, I can at least bet this. I bet that within this book, rather than objective evidence that is only true and can never not be true. There will be assertions, assumptions, and claims with zero objectively verifiable evidence. Watch. Guarantee. Watch. See, all it took was just Googling a PDF of the book online, looking at the most revered and talked about case in the book. And I did that. So when I went online, right? Chapter 3, Julia, the satanic queen, her possession and her remarkable abilities. And this isn't just applicable for this story, by the way. Take a look at Richard Gallagher's history and you'll see all of his proclaimed satanic possessions. None of them, not a single one, is recorded of them doing these fucking miraculous things. This guy begins to make a bunch of claims of how this meeting went, and like I said, none of this is objectively verifiable. We cannot verify that any of this happened. This is essentially a Bible of sorts. This is essentially just a bunch of claims by a guy in which, yeah, sure, he's credible, but we cannot be sure that he's telling the truth about any of this. I'm going to read you a few real quotes from this chapter, okay? These are things that this guy actually writes within the book, okay? By the way, these are all claims. I was right. You guys can go read the book. He doesn't provide a single lick of objectively verifiable evidence once. Look, here are some real claims. She revealed facts about people's lives she had no normal way of knowing, including intimate details about Gallagher's deceased mother and others involved in her case. And where's the evidence of that? I have nothing! This guy saying it. Another one. She could speak recognizable Latin and other foreign languages while in trance states, even though she had never studied them. And what is the evidence for this claim? Oh yeah, this guy saying it. Gallagher recounts, he actually says in the book, that Julia supposedly levitated during a ritual, and it was witnessed by clergy and assistants, but he didn't witness it, and the clergy people and assistants who supposedly did haven't come forward in public and publicly said they saw it. So again, this is just assertions. And this is probably the most funniest part. This is probably the funniest part about it. He says, there was no plausible psychiatric explanation for the full range of phenomena that Julia exhibited. He further wrote, this case represented an extraordinarily convincing example of the reality of demonic possession, perhaps the most obvious I've ever seen. So pretty much this dickwad has just tried to pass off a book, right? A book, just like his Bible, a book of a bunch of claims of a bunch of random guys saying, I saw this, I talked to this person, and I saw this, and this happened, and there's no video, there's no audio recording, there's not that many witnesses other than me, really, but I swear it happened. And this is the evidence he points out. This is why I think that people like this are a fucking joke. How can you form an entire worldview on the basis of a religion that you cannot defend? You literally cannot give any reason or any evidence as to why this is true.
The Bible has contradictions. Okay, you think you found an apparent contradiction that the church hasn't known about for 2,000 years? Every apparent contradiction can be explained by understanding just a little bit of theology.
Yeah, so what about the contradictions that are, confirmed to be contradictions, external to the Bible? Like the Genesis account, in which it says the sun was made after the earth, but we know that just isn't true. Or we can just look at the New Testament and the utter shakiness that surrounds Jesus and our information on his life. We can look specifically, walk with me now, Matthew 27:5 and Acts 1:18. Matthew says, and I quote, so Judas threw the money into the temple and left, then he went away and hanged himself. Now, this is of course talking about Judas, who betrayed Jesus, and he was paid money for it, in which in some books Judas buys a field, buys a bunch of land with the money, and in some verses he gives the money back, like in Acts 1:18, where, and I quote, with the payment he received for his wickedness, Judas bought a field. There he fell headlong, his body burst open, and all his intestines spilled out. So did he fall headlong and burst open, or did he hang himself? Which one? And did he throw the money into the temple, or did he buy a field? Which one? By the way, that's what I call a contradiction, buddy boyo. Those two things cannot be true at once. He cannot both have the money and throw the money away. He cannot lose all his intestines and then hang himself. There is no amount of theology that can reconcile this, okay? This is straight up just inconsistent.
The Gospels were anonymous. Okay, anonymous doesn't mean we have no idea who wrote them. It just means the names of the authors aren't signed in the text itself. But we literally have writings from church fathers who knew the apostles and can verify that they indeed wrote the books named after them.
So basically, you have more claims from more singular eyewitnesses, and that is your evidence. See, this is my problem with religion. You are selling some insane story about some maniacal, egotistical God who is honestly an asshole, and when asked for evidence, it's always just claims like, oh, I saw this, I saw this happen. And we can look through history, man. Eyewitness account, it is normal for historical claims, of course, but these are not just historical claims. These are claims of miracle. These are claims of godhood, okay? These are extraordinary claims, therefore they require extraordinary evidence. It's that simple, truly. But to be fair, speaking about how much you've gotten utterly wrong, you've gotten so much history in this video wrong, like so much of this shit wrong. I learned some of this shit about Hitler in like 7th grade, okay? This guy got so much shit wrong. I think I'll stick to academic consensus, which is we don't know who the fuck wrote the Gospels. We don't. But not just on a level of, oh well, they didn't write their name on it, but on a level of Matthew in specific is like the weakest candidate for traditional authorship. Like, Matthew says a lot of shit that no one else references. For example, Matthew talks about saints resurrecting from the dead and roaming the town after Jesus resurrected. No other book talks about this. No other historian from the time talked about it either. If a bunch of fucking undead saint zombies came out of the fucking ground and started walking around, I'd love to think that this would be documented, but it wasn't. Matthew and a lot of the books take a fuck ton of information from Mark, and we know certain books came before, so their authors would have had access to the other books to copy from it. It's to the point now that there isn't evidence of who exactly wrote the Bible, but actually evidence against its traditional authors. Funny that.
The Gospels misquote Jesus. Now, it's true that a lot of secular scholars think the Gospels are a mix of real quotes from the historical Jesus and fake quotes added by the church, but none of them can agree on which quotes are legit and which are not, so we can discard their opinions.
Yeah, confirmed. This guy has fucking rocks in his head. Why make a video dedicated to asking yourself questions and then answering them if you are going to run away from answering anything? I mean, this shit is so fucking weird. We have legitimate evidence that a lot of the claims are just straight up made up. A lot of the claims do not have any backing. They don't have any archaeological or historical evidence. They have no reference anywhere. As I said earlier with the example of Matthew, where certain people just say things happened, but there is zero correlation anywhere else in the Bible. That's what we're talking about. I already gave examples of that. Scholars have already found examples of that. Any evidence you haven't found is because you have confirmation bias and you refuse to look at anything that goes against your belief. Sorry to tell you, but your ass.
Congratulations!
Jesus never claimed to be God. Yes, he did. He didn't say, I am God, worship me, but he showed that he was God in many places in all 4 Gospels by doing things that only God can do. It's true that he didn't walk around before his resurrection claiming to be God, because he wanted people to figure it out themselves. That's why he kept saying, who do you say that I am? However, after his resurrection, people figured out that he was God, and Jesus congratulated them.
Look, I'll give one quick example right here. Luke 22:42. Father, if you are willing, take this cup from me. yet not my will but yours be done. Now, ignoring the underlying metaphor, regardless of that, the context of the verse is still Jesus asking himself if he is willing to, quote unquote, take this cup from himself. And he also says, yet not my will, but yours be done. So even Jesus differentiates his own will from God's will, meaning they're not the same person.
The Bible supports slavery. No, it doesn't. Just because there's slavery in the Bible doesn't mean the Bible supports it. There are some Old Testament verses that could be interpreted as condoning slavery, but Jesus himself said that the Old Testament made accommodations to people's sinful state. And also, slave owners in the American South had slave Bibles for their slaves to read, but it omitted a lot of the real Bible, so if the Bible actually did support slavery, this wouldn't have been necessary.
Your male and female slaves are to come from the nations around you. From them you may buy slaves. You may also buy some of the temporary residents living among you and members of their clans born in your country, and they will become your property. You can bequeath them to your children as inherited property and can make them slaves for life, but you must not rule over your fellow Israelites ruthlessly. Leviticus 25:44-46. Okay, so let's look at the definition of permission. It means to accept or allow. Now let's look at the definition of allow. It means giving someone permission. You can bequeath them to your children is permission. You can do this is permission. If I'm saying, especially if I'm God, I am the authority, I am telling you, you can make slaves for life. You can pass them down to your kids because they're your property. I am permitting this. That is straight up permission. And by the way, I don't know why Christians seem to think that they can get away by saying, oh, it's the Old Testament. That's not the New, it's the Old Testament. Matthew 5:17. Do not think that I have come to abolish the law or the prophets. I have not come to abolish them, but to fulfill them. Okay, so Jesus makes it clear himself. He has not come to abolish the old Mosaic law. He has come to fulfill it. This permission granted to own slaves and make them your slaves for life and pass them down to your kids as inherited property is a part of that law by which Jesus has specifically stated he is not here to abolish but to fulfill. So, I mean, your entire argument crumbles. You also don't know what you're talking about. The slave Bible wasn't altered because the regular Bible made slavery look bad and they wanted to change that. No, the slave's Bible was altered because even with all of the condoning of slavery, there are still verses in the book that say a slave owner cannot murder their slave, or that if a slave owner takes the eye or the tooth of a slave, then the slave must go free. There are a few regulations and such, so by stripping them, it should makes the slave owner have an easier time of owning the slave. That's why they altered the book.
Christianity supported slavery. Well, sure, some Christians did, but all human civilizations have had slavery. Christian civilization was the first one to abolish it on moral grounds. The fact that you're against slavery is due to Christian influence.
What the fuck is this bullshit?
Just the fact that he said that is so fucking disgusting. Just the fact that he's engaging in this nasty ass revisionist history, it makes me feel fucking dirty, quite frankly. No. Okay, majority of the people perpetuating slavery, I mean, it's been Christians. When we look at the history specifically of Christianity and slavery, there's been more Christians for it than against it. That's what I mean. And I mean, how many examples do we need to go through? We can look at Pope Nicholas V, when he authorized Portugal to enslave non-Christians in Africa and the New World. We can look at slavery in the American South, I mean, in my very own country, that affected my grandma and my great-grandma, Jim Crow laws and all that. This, you cannot deny, majority of the Confederacy were Christian. The reason why they wanted slavery was specifically because their God told them they could do it. That is just a fact. You cannot dodge that, okay? Also, when we look at the Bible, we look at verses like Ephesians 6:5, or the curse of Ham, a lot of these verses were used to justify slavery because, quite frankly, they kinda do. Or we can look at the fucking library worth of information on European colonialism. Look at the Spanish conquistadors, look at the British, look at all the colonialism done in Africa, the Americas, Asia's. All of them enslaved people, killed people, all in the hands of their God and Christianity. Not in the name of atheism, no, but in the name of God. And that's just plain history. It has not been mostly Christians abolishing slavery. That's just not true. And it also gets to the point in which a lot of these people are going to claim to be Christian as well, because the church at certain points of history would fucking execute you or put you on Galileo style house lockup where you cannot fucking leave until you die just because your discoveries go against the church.
Also, most organizations fighting modern day slavery are Christian.
Of sources which verify that he was for the invasion of Iraq.
Wrong.
God killed tons of people in the Bible. Well, it's actually way more than that. God numbers everyone's days. He's the giver of life, so he can take it, especially if people sin.
I mean, nice sugarcoat, I guess, but I mean, even you make your own God seem like a fucking mob boss who's like, oh yeah, I put you in this world, I can take you out of it, I can just go murder a bunch of fucking babies, and you can't say it's evil, nah, boo-boo. I mean, what fucking garbage-ass God do y'all believe in, man? Look at this guy. Even a prominent defender of God makes him seem like a dickhead.
Atheist countries are more prosperous. Yes, it's true that Northern European countries are very prosperous and very secular, but correlation doesn't equal causation. It's not like atheism causes prosperity, it's that prosperity causes atheism because when people have comfortable lives, they don't feel a need to depend on God.
So you further prove the point. Why do they move away from Christianity? Because it's fucking garbage. Well, let's look at Germany. I'm from Germany, perfect example. Yeah, it was rooted in Christianity. And what happened when Christianity took the reins of the country? Fucking Nazis. Mustached man was genociding people. And your God might actually support that, considering how he was just telling people to wipe out the Amalekites and the Canaanites and all these groups of people. Just go fucking murder, rape, and take all the virgins. You further prove my point more. These countries that were even based on Christianity or other religions slowly stop. They slowly leave the religion. This doesn't just apply to these countries. These apply to most of the world. The world is slowly becoming more secular year after year, and I fucking love it. Because you know what else I noticed? And this is direct correlation and causation. This isn't just a fallacy. This is direct correlation and causation. Secularism just tends to lead to a better world. Who would have thought that listening to an ancient book written by a bunch of unknown fucking bums in the desert about a God that is so inconsistent and immoral and cruel and evil, who would have thought not listening to that unproven garbage ass nonsense would produce better results in a society? Who would have fucking thought? Again, when you get sick, you go to the hospital. You don't go to the church. Secularism is better. Religion isn't proven to do anything.
But why are these particular countries so prosperous in the first place? They may be secular now, but they're rooted in generations and generations of Protestant Christianity. If you want an example of a country that's atheist and not rooted in Christianity, look at communist China. If God created everything, then who created God? Well, God is defined as the uncaused causer. Everyone knows there needs to be a first cause at the beginning of the chain of all events in the universe, and it makes a lot more sense for that first cause to be a personal God who caused things for a reason, rather than some random impersonal force.
Well, no, it makes more sense for you because you're an idiot. Like, of course it makes more sense. You're fucking stupid. Like, that tracks. Also, this is just fallacious logic, okay? This is just a pathetic, desperate-ass attempt at special pleading. The universe can't be eternal. The universe can't be the uncaused causer. But God is. My God is. You say, oh, my God is defined as such. Buddy, you don't know your gods. There also does not have to be a first cause to the universe, because we do not know if the universe ever had a beginning or if there was ever nothing. So, no. Just no.
Science disproves God. Well, actually, the church invented modern science. All the founders of the scientific revolution deeply believed in God, and medieval theologians laid the groundwork for modern science by saying the world was governed by an intelligent creator. That means we can understand the world with our intelligence. And studying God led to studying the world, because the world is God's creation.
See, this is the point I'm gonna end it on, because this is a very fucking stupid ass thing for him to say. So firstly, it doesn't matter if a bunch of smart people believed in God, because again, a bunch of smart people believe in other gods and you don't agree with them. Also, maybe you should do a little history into your fucking church, okay? If some of these people were not Christian and said the things they did, they would be put on house arrest like Galileo or fucking killed. So again, of course they were Christian, they either believed or got fucking blacklisted and murdered. Furthermore, we literally do not use the Bible as a science textbook for this reason. If science proved God, then scientists would mostly believe in God, but they don't. When we read the Bible and apply what we read to real life, we get wrong fucking answers, as I talked about in Genesis with the sun coming before the earth. The less scientists believed in God, the less God and religion that was interjected in science, guess what? The more advancements that were made. You notice that in literally almost every aspect of life, less religion and less belief in a God with no evidence always leads to better results, more technology, more discoveries, more medicine, all that. Religion only ever hinders society. You can say 1000% early science and the early scientific method and all that was fostered by the church and fostered by religious people, 1000%. But you also cannot say that those people were not coerced into believing because of the repercussions for not doing so in society back then. And you also cannot deny the fact that the less religion in science, the better it's gotten. And in this last point I really want to make, scientists and people back then also believed in a God more than not, because they didn't understand any possible way for the universe to come about naturally. That's why. Of course, these people would believe in a God, because they literally have no other fucking way of understanding where rain comes from, where thunder comes from, where earthquakes, floods. Think about that. A fucking flood back then, they didn't know what the fuck that was. That seems like divine damage. That seems like divine harm. That seems like something is literally pushing the waters, the oceans onto land. Of course they would think of a God. They don't understand any natural way that could ever happen by itself. So of course they have to jump to something crazy powerful. They don't understand how it could come about any other way. And that has been my TED Talk. Thank you guys for coming out.
Please! Please!